5 years later, in 1943, Hofmann decided to give this compound a second look. Typically, when a compound is discarded, it's gone for good, but something about the chemical structure intrigued him, and he thought LSD-25 could have properties other than what was witnessed in the original tests. So when Hofmann was synthesizing LSD for the second time, some of the substance somehow got absorbed through his skin, as he became interrupted from his work by unusual sensations. It was likely just a minuscule amount of LSD that made its way into Hofmann's system, as he was able to carry on with his day and get home properly. But when he plopped down on his couch, he was, and I quote, in a dreamlike state, and perceived an uninterrupted stream of fantastic pictures, extraordinary shapes with intense kaleidoscopic play of colors. So being highly intrigued with the substance, Hofmann decided to ingest a calculated dose just 3 days later. So on April 19th, 1943, he took 0.25 milligrams of substance, or 250 micrograms, which is seemingly a tiny amount on paper, but it turns out just a minuscule dose of LSD-25 is capable of throwing a human into what seems like an entirely different realm. And this led to the first ever bad acid trip in history. The come up was fast for Hofmann, the first intentional LSD trip of all time, and he was quickly thrust into a state of what he believed to be irretrievable insanity. Feeling very uncomfortable, he decided to go home for the day. But being in Switzerland during the darkest days of World War II, cars were not allowed on the streets, meaning there was no other way for him to get home other than to ride his bike, which is why this epic day is now remembered as Bicycle Day. So some way, somehow, Hofmann made it home. He quickly has his assistant call in a doctor. At this point, Hofmann noted he was experiencing everyday mundane objects take on frightening and seemingly threatening forms. And as he peaked, his ego began to dissolve. And because he knew nothing about the effects of the drug, he was convinced he was actually dying, or that he'd at least be in the state of insanity he was in permanently. He quotes, "My ego was suspended somewhere in space, and I saw my body lying dead on the sofa." The doctor found nothing physically wrong with Hofmann. Everything appeared to be normal, heartbeat was normal, temperature was normal, nothing appeared out of whack, except his pupils were quite dilated. As Hofmann began to calm down and his ego returned, the horrifying vibe wore off, and now he began to experience the classic psychedelic afterglow, which typically gives one an elevated and energetic mood and puts one into a state of being relatively free from concern. Essentially, it's the exact opposite of a hangover. Despite being the person credited with inventing LSD, Hofmann is convinced the substance found him.